Alright, to get your fabric bowl wrap started, I have my 1/2 inch piece of fabric. It doesn't have to be cut perfectly even, but you know, you want to have at least one generally straight edge. If both edges are ragged, you will have some fraying, which can add to the look if you like that sort of thing. But I like to have my straighter edge on my right side and my not so straight edge on my left, because that's the edge that's going to get wrapped into the basket. Okay, so now I have my cording. If you want, you can put a little bit of glue here. I don't generally, it depends on the type of cording that I'm using, but this one tends to hold up pretty good. So I have my piece of fabric and my cording over here, and now I'm just going to take it and kind of fold it in, and you just kind of want to tuck that piece of fabric into itself so that it's contained all the way, and you have a little bit of an overlap over here that's covering up the cording. That's going to be hidden inside of your basket when you start it off, okay? So generally right about this point is when I go ahead and use my clip. So I have a little binding clip, and I'm just going to stick it on the end after I wrap around one more little loop here, just to kind of get it tight. You want to pull it a little bit so that it gets nice and tight in there, and then wrap it around again. And I'll show you my wrapping technique. But we want to hold that edge so it doesn't come undone. So I just put my clip on it. Now my wrapping technique works like this. I have my thumb on my right hand kind of holding down that fabric. It's wrapped tight around my cord, and then I wrap it at an angle. I pull it tight as I wrap. I move my thumb down to the next piece, fold it under, pull it tight again, move my thumb down to hold it, and I just go from there. So I wrap from underneath and come over and then wrap again. You don't need it to be super overlapping because you don't want it to be really, really thick. The cording is already going to provide a really thick area to have to sew through. So you want to have it come in at an angle so that you're just barely covering the piece, the little edge over here before. You want to just have that fabric just cover that up. And that's why I like the skinnier strips better, because that becomes easier to do. If you have a really thick strip, you're going to notice it get bulky very, very fast, and that becomes difficult to sew through. So you want to make sure that your strips are under an inch. I like to use 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch in width. And if they're too wide, I will just use my little scissors that I keep in my basket and trim them to size as I get down there. So almost done with this wrap. What I've done is I've cut up fat quarters. That provides a nice length so that it doesn't get twisted as I'm wrapping it. You'll notice if you cut yardage, selvage to selvage, it's a good idea to kind of cut them in half so that they're 18 to 20 inches long. Otherwise, they start kind of twisting in on themselves. Alright, so for your starter piece, you want to have, I would do two strips so you have a nice good start already wrapped for you, ready to go. And then you're ready to begin your base. When you get started, it's really important that you begin with your cord feeding in on the correct side. I like to use the metal zigzag foot because it seems to guide the fabric in better, and it slides and it doesn't catch. If you have a clear one, you may notice that the fabric will not feed as smoothly, so I recommend using a metal one. I know people have also reported success in using a cording foot, but I don't have one, so I just use a zigzag foot. On your machine, you want to set it to a stitch that is wide enough to cover both sides of your cording as it goes underneath your foot. So it needs to be able to go to both sides easily. So make it as wide as you need to go. You know, that depends on the machine, and you also kind of want it a little tight so it holds it in together. And you can play with that as you work with the different types of cording and fabric. You know, what's good for one particular machine may not be good for another. So, you know, try to see what works best for you. Now, to get started, you want to think about your general shape that you're going for. If you want a rounder bowl, then what you're going to want to do is shorten up this beginning area so that it's as small as possible. And for that, I do recommend using a stiletto or you know, a purple thing or a seam ripper to kind of push it together so that your fingers are not going to get caught in this, because this is the tricky part. Getting started can be difficult, and I recommend making sure that your particular machine can raise up off the bed quite high, because you need to be able to feed a very thick piece of cording underneath there. So if it can't raise up very high, you're going to have problems feeding it through. And some of the less expensive machines, it doesn't raise up as high as, you know, the more expensive machines. So if you're finding that you're having problems, either use a cord that's not as thick, or try it on a different sewing machine if you have access to one, and see how that goes. So I want more of an oblong shape, so I'm going to do a kind of a longer area for my beginning stitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm folding this over like this, and I'm going to start right up here at the tip. So I'm going to put that under my machine so that my stitch catches it in on the zigzag. And I'm going to kind of push it together. And what I have on my particular foot is a red line in the very center. That should follow my crease in each line of cording that I'm going down. So I want to make sure that that middle red line follows my crease. If you don't have a mark on your foot, you can add one easily, either with a little marker or some chalk or a piece of tape or something, so that you know where to kind of follow along on the crease and how to keep it lined up to make sure that both sides are getting a nice stitch in so that it's held together well. And I'm going to check and make sure that my needle is going to hit both sides. And I have a mirror function. If you don't have a mirror function, you can just manually run the stitch in and out and see if it jumps to both sides, and this is going to cover it. So something to think about. Your bobbin thread is going to be on the outside of your bowl, okay? So if you want a certain color on the inside and a certain color on the outside, you want to make sure that your bobbin thread is the color that you want to go on the outside of your bowl. Okay, I want white on both sides, so I just went ahead and used white. So now I'm just going to start stitching. And make sure if you have a needle down function that that is turned on, so that whenever you stop, the needle stops in the down position. This will keep it from unraveling or coming loose. So I'm going to go to the end where my little beginning wrap was, and as I come close, I'm going to stop on the outside on my long piece of stitching. I'm going to stop in that one because I'm going to turn this and then have it kind of catch. I'm going to go ahead and trim my threads so that they don't get caught into the bottom of the bowl. And the turn can be kind of difficult, so play with it a little bit and see what you can do to kind of get it to turn. Alright, now I'm going to try and get that middle stitch area to be back in the center. Alright, and the next turn should be much, much easier. And as I turn, I'm going to have it throw some stitches in. Play with it. You'll get a rhythm down. So now I've got kind of the base of my bowl started. I'm just going to continue wrapping and adding to this bowl. And your base is going to be how big the bottom of your bowl is. And then the sides of your bowl will climb from there. We've got our color change going in. Now when I stop, I'm going to stop way before I get to my next piece because I need to wrap more on there. And you can see that when I zoom out. Whoop. Okay, I like to leave more than this. I like to leave a lot more actually. But for this purpose, I'm just going to leave a little bit of a tail. You need enough to work with so you can add on to your wrap. And that's what I'm going to show you next. Alright, so we've reached one of the end of our strips and we need to add another one on. So I'm going to be alternating blue and purple, and I have a third color in here that I want to add in, which is kind of a darker purple. So that's what I'm going to add in next. Okay, so we've got our strip. Remember to keep the straight edge on your right side, and if you have a jagged edge, keep it on your left so that it gets hidden. Mine are kind of even. Okay. So I've got the spot where my wrap has ended. I want to make sure that is nice and tight, and you can kind of see that there. Right, and I'm going to be adding in my next strip. I'm going to insert it kind of underneath, bring the little fold over the top, tuck it in with my thumb, and then I'm going to begin wrapping again. Make sure it is nice and tight as you do that beginning wrap. Whenever you add a join in, it's going to be kind of bulky in that area, so make sure that you're not wrapping too much right there because it's going to be really bulky and then add little bumps into your bowl. So try to wrap it in nice and tight, but don't add too much fabric to that area. And then you just continue wrapping like normal. And what I like to do is, once I get my bottom started, I'll sit for half an hour and just do a lot of wrapping. I'll wrap up tons and tons of cord so that I can just do a lot of straight sewing for a while, so that I don't have to stop every section and wrap a new piece on. So something you can do if you really wanted, you could certainly tie off your stitch on your base here and then wrap and then bring it back under your machine and start again. So that would be no problem. You just want to make sure as you're working on your sewing machine that you're feeding in from the right hand side and that your bowl is being formed on your left hand side so that as you start to raise this up, you have room underneath your arm of your sewing machine for your bowl to get bigger and bigger and to form. So that's what I like to do. I like a pretty big base. Depending on the size of your bowl, you can make a very large base and a short squat bowl, or a small base and have a small bowl altogether. Just keep in mind with small bowls you may not have a whole lot of clearance here to make it curvy. So keep that in mind. Very small bowls can be a little tricky. I found that out recently. So